Well, SABC reporter Makikitla Mutlabi has been covering that meeting at Wits University and joins us now from the Wits campus in Braamfontein. Makikitla, we've just seen the address by Advocate Tulima Donsela and Jay Naidu. What's the latest now? Has the meeting ended?
Good evening to you, Lulu. Yeah, the meeting just ended now as I'm speaking to you. The students have dispersed to their respective places. So before this particular meeting here at the Solomon Mahlangu House started, this particular meeting was supposed to be held at the Trinity Church just next to Wits University. But we saw a large crowd of students, of course, occupying that particular church, and it was actually forced out to be coming here, to be held here at the Solomon Mahlangu House. But right there, we saw the VC or Vice Chancellor of Wits University, Adam Habib, coming through, and the students, of course, booing him. And of course, he was actually eventually escorted out of the church. I don't know, perhaps for his safety. But at this point in time, we understand that the students actually are still furious after that particular judgment we saw earlier on, Lulu, that Mqebo Dlamini was denied bail, and they are saying that he is the reason. Vice Chancellor Mqebo Dlamini has been denied bail and is now in the darkness of that particular prison. So we know that this particular meeting here, Lulu, was just to try to bring peace among students as well as the university. But we understand that management of the university was not here. But at least we managed to get student leaders as well as the mediators to come through and tell us what exactly has been agreed upon. But to tell us more about that, of course, I'm joined by Busisiwe. She's one of the student leaders here at the Wits University. Busisiwe, thanks so much for your time. Just tell us what exactly is the latest from this meeting.
At this point in time, what we're going to do is we've allowed students to go back to their respective residences, those that are on campus, to get something warmer to wear, as we will be reconvening in defying the curfew that has been set up by the institution to prevent us from gathering even when we're not gathering at night. So essentially to disrupt the movement in the sense of making sure that students aren't allowed to move around campus, either from the libraries to their residences or from off campus to their residences. So we will be defying the curfew today, along with everyone that has come through to stand in solidarity with us.
Vice Chancellor Professor Habib was actually booed when he got into that church. Just tell us more about that. Why was that? Isn't this the time that you're supposed to be bringing the management onto the negotiating table to actually see a way forward into this particular process?
Essentially, we always welcome engagement, especially if it is engagement that will move the movement forward and the call for free decolonized education, and also to a large extent demilitarize our campuses. But one thing that we have noted is that Habib Adam is a sinner, and he came into that church not wanting to repent, but essentially there to dictate to students how we would then continue forward. We have been trying to engage with management. We had been trying to engage with him for the past 4 weeks now. We've been protesting for a month, and he's been a ghost, and he only chooses to appear after he had instigated what has resulted in our VC, the one that we recognize, Mqebo Dlamini, being in prison at the moment. So as students, we said to him, if he wants to come and speak to students, the first person he must go and address is our Vice Chancellor, who is currently at Sun City Prison at the moment, and that is the only kind of communication we're willing to have with him, in essence, where he comes and he apologizes to students, where we can have proper negotiations, where we can have a proper discussion. But that is something that he hasn't been interested in for the past 4 weeks, and we're very skeptical about why he was at the church today. And essentially, we must understand that students were very upset about what happened with Mqebo Dlamini being sent to prison essentially until the 15th of November. So until we are able to make sure that the university will engage with us in good faith, we're not interested in seeing the VC in any capacity.
But then what do you make of that judgment today at the Johannesburg Magistrates Court?
Essentially, the judgment was a form of repression and oppression from the state. This goes to validate, and it also shows the public what we've been saying about not only our institutions of higher learning, but the state, essentially to say we're living in a post-apartheid state. The fact that at Wits University we have curfews, the fact that leaders and students are kidnapped and found in neighboring provinces that they do not belong to, naked and beaten and brutalized, goes to show the nature and the violence that the state is perpetuating on student bodies and black bodies around campuses. So essentially, we are not happy at all with the outcome that we found at the court with regards to Mcebo Dlamini. But one thing that we do note that he had been echoing and is still echoing at the moment is that we must continue to hold the ground, no retreat, no surrender, and that's the line that we're going to move on.
There's been a question lingering around social media. People are asking, is this free education for the poor and the missing middle, or is it free education for all, even those who can afford?
Essentially, it is free education for all, and the reason why we can say that is because many people will complain to say that the rich can afford. We will be taxing the rich a lot more, which means they are still paying for their children to come to school. So essentially, we're saying that this free, decolonized, quality education is for all, because we can't distinguish who is poor and who isn't. We would have to set up a metric, right? And essentially, that metric is what is being used at the moment through the NAFSA system, and we note that the NSFAS system is not working. So we're saying that we want this free, decolonized, quality education for all.
Just briefly, there's a Peace Commission that's been appointed. Are you still recognizing it?
We reject all forms of commissions. We reject all forms of task teams. This is a commission that has been set up since 1994. It has gone through the ages of 2008 when when the ANC sat in Mangaung. That commission did say that we have a possibility and we have a chance of getting free, decolonized education. We don't believe in that commission because essentially most of it is comprised of state security and the security cluster. We don't understand what the security cluster has to do with free, decolonized education. If the government wants a model, we have a model. The rest of the country has a model. We just need them to sit down and to listen to us.
What is the plan going ahead?
At this point in time, we are going to actively move forward in defying the curfew that has been set by the institution, and we will be moving on to our plan of action for tomorrow that we will consolidate with students towards the end of this meeting tonight.
Thanks so much for your time. Let me just bring in one of the mediators here, Jay Naidu. Thanks so much for your time indeed. I know you've been through this process with the students, and today I know the meeting is about bringing peace among the institution as well as students. What is it so far? What's going on?
First of all, let me clarify, I'm not a mediator. I was invited by the WITS Academic Staff Union to come and talk about our experiences of the past of navigating major crises like this in the 1980s and 1990s, and the process that led up to the formation of the National Peace Accord that created the environment within which a negotiation took place that led us to a very successful political transition that was peaceful. So I attended, that meeting was cancelled, and the students reconvened here and invited us who were billed to speak there to join them. I'm glad that I have joined them, because I witnessed firsthand the deep-seated and profound anger that exists in our campuses, and it is intolerable. This is happening in our universities where the cream of our leadership that would lead our country are seething with anger. And it also is a mirror of the major anger that is exploding around service delivery protests on the ground. We need political will today. We need our government to start listening to the citizens and listening to students like in Fees Must Fall. They are making a legitimate demand, and we need to make the right choices. Do we need to spend R1 trillion on a nuclear deal that we don't need, we cannot afford, and it's not part of an energy mix that our future economy demands? Or should we put that in investing in young people to produce the skills and the capabilities that make our country more competitive economically in the future?
Students are actually calling for police and security guards to be removed from the campus. What's your take on that? Do you think the presence of police and security guards has been actually instigating violence on campus?
Well, if you go back to the 1980s, one of our big demands in the townships was the removal of troops from our schools and townships. The introduction of security forces always makes the situation more volatile, even though in many instances they are there to protect the property of the state or people that want to attend university. So I think it's a double-edged sword, but it cannot be solved. The problems of the crisis in education cannot be solved by security means. It is a political problem. That's why we need political will. And I think the solution to our overall crisis has to come in a negotiation between the government and the students' movement. The universities are not in a position to meet the needs or the demands of students in terms of the financing. It is only the government can do that. And that's why I think that the most important thing to do today is for government to make a commitment and to agree that it has to sit down in a negotiation that envisages a future where we can have free quality education that is decolonized. And I think in that context, the peace agreement that we succeeded in building in the mid-90s would be important lessons for what needs to happen today to normalize the environment.
So the students are calling for free education. It's very urgent. They're saying they want it now. Do you think it's possible?
Well, you know, I was, most of my life I was a trade union organizer. Every worker, every trade union wanted a living wage in the first negotiation. It is a process. The outcome of that process is dependent on the negotiation, is dependent on what we would call the balance of forces, and is dependent on what the government decides is its priorities. I am saying there is sufficient funds within the state that allow us to reach that goal sooner rather than later.
So just finally, another call, the students are actually calling for management to meet with them and help them shut down the university until the government agrees to free education. Do you agree with that approach?
Well, you know, I'm a trade union organizer by background. You know, in our time, we would never argue that the factory should close down because it would disperse the power we have, and also people would lose incomes. I think the issue of seeing the university as a site of struggle where people are congregating, like we spent 5 hours listening to students' grievances and their views, and I think it was very educational for me. I learned a lot. And I think that they must consider the choices they make around the shutdown in that context, because it will disperse the movement and they will lose momentum as a result of that. But that's the whole challenge of the environment that we are living in. I think it's really an important call to all of us, parents, community leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, business leaders, that the situation is simmering and that the universities, in a sense, are a mirror of our society. If we do not act, and act urgently, we will go over the edge of the precipice.
So thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.
That's Jay Naidu, the founding Secretary General of COSATU, of course, pouring out his views about the current situation at Wits University and around other institutions around in the country. And of course, Lulu, we understand that the students, as you had before, they are actually regrouping and trying to see a way forward into this struggle. But, well, we heard that the struggle still continues, but we will see as the day or as the night falls what will actually bring tomorrow in the morning. But at this stage, well, the students are still saying that they want to speak to the management and help them shut down the university until the government agrees to free education. But how will that happen? We're not sure at this point in time, Lulu.
And thank you, Mahikitla. That was our reporter, Mahikitla Mutlabi, with an update from Wits University.